or resolved.
Mm. Were there instances when you were unhappy with the decisions of any of these admin agencies?
Oh yes, for sure. I found over the years that sometimes it's very hard to deal with them, and and I've had 4 kids. They're all grown up now, but just dealing with things in education department as well, and there's so many different departments to deal with day in, day out.
Okay. How about the others? Have you had any dealings? Paul has had dealings with the Defense Force Ombudsman. Paul, would you care to share your experience there? What exactly happened there? What did you do? Why did you have a dealing with the Ombudsman?
Well, it wasn't. Well, it was a problem. When I left the Defence Force, I did 15 years. I had 5 months long service leave owing to me, and the policy at the time was you couldn't take your long service leave on discharge. They paid you out, and then you're financially penalised because you're taxed on that. So I actually raised the issue with the Defence Force Ombudsman, seeking to have that changed. And actually it was changed, but not in time for me to leave. So, change takes a bit of time, but at least, my interaction with the Ombudsman actually brought something about which benefits a lot of other people now.
Okay, good. Anyone else? So typically, if we had a problem with a decision of an admin agency, the typical thing we would do would actually be to raise it probably with somebody within the same department, right? So if you were talking to one of the office staff, if the outcome or if the decision of a subordinate of a subordinate staff or a subordinate member were not according to your liking, you were likely to raise it with the manager. Okay, but what is the problem? What do you see as a problem if your avenues in order to probably get a decision reversed from a subordinate member, and you appeal it to somebody higher within the same department? Would there be a problem with that? What do you think from your experience?
Well, generally, if you're going to, it's Paul. If you're going to appeal something, normally you go to that person's direct supervisor, but it may not be within their realm or their scope of work to be able to make that change. Sometimes if it's policy or especially if it's legislated policy, people can't reverse that on a whim. It actually has to go through a process and through legislational change or regulational change, whichever it is.
Yes. And Janet is saying something here about possible conflict of interest or lack of independence. Janet, would you care to explain that? Janet, are you able to turn on your mic?
Can you hear me?
I could hear you, yes.
Okay, I'm dropping in and out here. My session's not going too well. The lack of independence, if it's an internal investigation, I always have an issue with how independent are they, how objective are they going to be versus subjective, and conflict of interest that follows on from that to me.
Yeah. So there's a good chance that once a subordinate makes a decision, chances are the supervisor or the manager might just go with whatever has initially been decided. And in other words, in that case, somebody else is just going to be able to rubber stamp whatever decision was made by people, in the lower ranks of that particular department. Raymond says the supervisors have better skills at saying no to me. Yeah. Okay. So now, having had a discussion about the context of our dealings with administrative law, let's try to go to the first discussion question. Why do you think is it important to study administrative law? And what I'd like you to do initially for the next 3 minutes is to type your answers in the chat box. I'd like all of you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'd like to ask the 8 of you, if you could, to just give me your answer to that discussion question, and then we'll take it from there. Why do you think is it important to study administrative law? So think about it for now, for about a minute or two. Some of you have probably answered that question in Moodle. You could just copy and paste that answer into the chat box. But I'm hoping that everyone will answer all of these discussion questions in the chat box, and then we'll have an oral discussion after that. So once you're ready to give your answer, please type it in the chat box. Andrew is on the phone either way. Okay, that's fine, Andrew. Okay. So do we have we given everyone an opportunity to answer that question there? Okay, so I think most of you have given his or her answer. Would anyone want to take the floor? Why is it important to study administrative law? Why do you think is it important? Let's assume that there were no administrative law. Let's assume, because actually, if you read the book, administrative law as a discipline of law is quite recent. So assuming that there was no such thing as administrative law, what would have been the implication of that? Okay, so if there were, yep.
Yeah, it's Matt here.
Yes, Matt.
If you're working as a legal practitioner, as a solicitor, and you have a client who comes in who's got a grievance with one of these departments or with one of these agencies, you need to be able to assist them with that grievance and have a structured response for them to take to the review or to the to challenge the decision that's been made by that authority. That's why we need administrative law.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else would like to add his or her thought? What is administrative law all about, and why is it so important?
This is Josh here.
Yes, Josh.
I would say that administrative law is important because it's basically what connects Parliament with us, everyday people, in the way that it's like a lot of agencies and different government departments, they are enforce and they have their authority through basically delegated authority through an executive branch or legislation, things like that. So administrative law provides a framework around that for practitioners to be able to challenge decisions made by those branches, by that branch of government, the executive. So when people come to us with questions about why something was refused or things like that, we're able to have an educated answer based on the framework of administrative law.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. So as Josh pointed out, although there are other reasons which we might cite as to the importance of studying administrative law, at its core, administrative law provides us a mechanism to actually challenge decisions of the executive department at its core. Because obviously, part of administrative law also involves the mechanism for us to be able to gather information, for example, from government agencies through freedom of information legislation, for example, or it could be recourse to the ombudsman, which enables the ombudsman to independently examine the way that decisions might have been reached by agencies of the government. So at its core, administrative law provides a legal recourse by which excesses of the government, excesses of the administrative government or the executive government may be examined or may be reviewed, or by which decisions of the executive government may actually be modified or changed or reversed or set aside, or a new decision made at its core. Now, if we did not have administrative law, in other words, what would have been the effect? If we did not have the mechanism of administrative law as a discipline, and we wanted to challenge decisions of the executive department, what would have been, the possible courses of action we could take? What legal avenues are present or are available? Traditionally, what was the legal avenue available to challenge decisions of the executive department? Historically, looking back.
As Paul pointed out in the comments, challenging through bringing an action against them.
Yep. So if we did not have a mechanism of administrative law and the administrative tribunals, the only recourse we would have had would be to go to the common law or go to the courts, meaning go to the judiciary. Okay? What is the issue with that? What's the problem with going to the judiciary? From a layman's point of view.
Cost?
Yeah, the cost. Cost would be one. What makes it expensive?
Legal representation.
Yep, because usually you need legal representation. And then, as Matt pointed out, there'll be the question of time, because courts are clogged. Okay? So administrative law, therefore, has provided an avenue whereby decisions of the executive department or agencies of the executive department may be re-examined or may be reviewed by administrative tribunals. Obviously, you can have an internal review. That's still part of administrative law. But in general, when we speak of an independent attempt at reviewing decisions of administrative agencies, our recourse would be to go to administrative tribunals. And there's the advantage of you don't really have to represent yourself. I mean, you could actually represent yourself. You don't need a lawyer for that. Typically, it's inexpensive. It doesn't cost you anything. It's probably faster. It's also more informal. And with those challenges largely be in the format of ADR. You mean alternative dispute resolution? No. Actually, no, because the alternative dispute resolution is a different mechanism whereby two contesting parties have either to submit themselves through mediation, which is different. In this case, if you speak of mechanisms of administrative law, you go, for example, to the administrative appeals tribunal, and there's a mechanism. It's a distinct mechanism because you have so-called judges who are actually able to make decisions after they review any decisions made by officers of the executive department. Okay, so do we have any questions so far on this? So we're beginning to touch now on the importance of administrative law and trying to compare it to the mechanism of reviews by the judiciary. When you speak of administrative law, as we will later on see, we will still see that there is still a role that the judiciary plays. And then we will see a distinction between a review of a decision on the basis of, okay, hold on. Your free HD meeting will end in 10 minutes. Okay. Now what will happen is, if it ends in 10 minutes, because this is a free session now, if it ends in 10 minutes, what I will do is to create another meeting, then we just go back. Okay? We still have 10 minutes anyway. So where was I? So we will later see that in terms of reviews of decisions, if you speak of decisions reviewed by administrative tribunals, they focus on the merits, meaning the factual correctness of decisions of officers of the executive department. Whereas if you go to the judiciary and the judiciary tries to review decisions of the executive department, they focus on the legality of the decision. So on the one hand, you speak of factual correctness, whether or not the decision was actually correct on the basis of the merit. The other one, courts on the other hand, focus solely and mainly on the legality of the decision. Is the decision according to law? If you speak of administrative decisions, on the other hand, the review of administrative decisions, the question is on its merits. Is the decision correct? Okay, so we're going to examine that closely. Now we'll go to question number 2. How would you distinguish administrative law from other fields of law? In particular, how is administrative law distinguished from constitutional law?
Constitutional law is focused on that one document, being the Constitution. Administrative law, whilst also is based around ideals of the Constitution in regards to the executive branch, it's about how the executive interact with us, the citizens of the country, rather than the actual document of the Constitution itself.
Okay, so if it's constitutional law, typically the backdrop is the Constitution. Okay, that makes sense. And if it's administrative law, constitutional values may come into play, but not really that much. Okay, that's one. That's correct. Anything else? How would you distinguish administrative law from constitutional law?
Hi, Munjo, it's Paul.
Yes, Paul.
Just shooting from the hip. With administrative law, it doesn't necessarily involve the courts. There could be avenues through, as I said before, the ombudsman and through other channels. Even though it is administrative law, you don't have to go to the judiciary. There could be procedures and protocols to keep you out of that. Okay,
that's good. Yes. How about in terms of the parties involved typically?
Well, administrative law would be between the executive government and the people challenging the decision, whereas constitutional law is more to do with the Commonwealth against state, or things like to do with powers and where they're vested at state level or federal level. So
if you go by constitutional law, for example, there are 2 key aspects of constitutional law, apart from talking about constitutional rights and freedoms. One is constitutional law is concerned with the separation of powers among the 3 branches of government. So you have the executive, you have the judiciary, and the legislature. So you are looking at the tension that is there in when it comes to power of the government, because you have the power of the government being shared across 3 branches of government, and you would like to avoid a situation where a single branch of government actually wields all the power to pass the law, the power to execute it, as well as the power to decide on whether or not a law may actually be constitutional, or whether or not it actually may be legal. Because the moment that the power to pass legislation, execute legislation, and review legislation falls in a single body of government, you end up with an autocracy. Because that single institution is able to do anything, and that anything that institution does will be legal. So that's one aspect of constitutional law. The other aspect of constitutional law, at least in the context of a federation, would involve the tension between the Commonwealth government and the states. So that's the other aspect of constitutional law. On the other hand, when you examine administrative law, the focus is actually mainly between the tension between the executive government and the people, as Josh pointed out, and the individuals. So administrative law provides a mechanism to examine that tension, or to try to curtail excesses or abuses made by the executive government in its decisions or in its activities. So if you see in terms of the parties, you can see a main distinction there. Okay, would that be clear enough? Was that clear enough? Now, there's a lot of convergence there. So if I might ask, I'll give you a few minutes to answer this question. In what areas do you think would constitutional law and administrative law converge? So we've talked of the divergence. Okay, one of the distinction between administrative law and constitutional law relates to the tension, the parties involved in a tension. That's one. But in what areas would administrative law and constitutional law, for example, converge? Where lie some commonalities between administrative law and constitutional law? Give it a few more minutes. Think about it, maybe for about 2 minutes, and then please give your answers in the chat box. Now that is important because a lot of these themes, there are certain themes actually which cut across both administrative law and constitutional law. So we need to be very clear along what lines, along what dimensions do administrative law and constitutional law converge? Along what areas are they the same? And in what areas are they actually do they actually diverge? So that needs to be clear in our minds right now. So if you could give it a few, maybe 2 minutes, and then when you're ready, try to tell me along what dimensions or along what themes or along what areas would administrative law and constitutional law have a commonality. That's okay, Janet. But if you could just type your answer in the chat box. Executive. Okay. If you could give complete sentences so that I get a sense of what your answer might be. Okay, so let me just repeat the question, Andrew. So my question was, initially we talked about the way by which administrative law is different from constitutional law. My question now is, along what areas or along what themes would there be a commonality between administrative law and constitutional law? And that area of constitutionality is actually crucial, because you will see that by studying, for you guys who are studying both constitutional law and administrative law, you will see that there is actually a common theme that we will study in both courses, in both subjects. What is that, or what are those? Okay, so along what dimensions or along what themes would administrative law and constitutional law converge? We've talked of the divergence. How about the convergence now? And that convergence is actually very important to both administrative law and constitutional law. Very, very important theme, especially in Australia. Can I see the others answer? From Andrew would be how the government interacts with us and the powers of the executive. Okay. Matters of legislation from Josh, piece of legislation. Okay. Yep. That's fine. Okay. From Paul,